Hello, I'm Kiran and welcome to my woodworking channel. If you want to know how I made this modern industrial bedside lamp and want to follow along to make one for yourself, stick around. I made some rough drawings to settle on a design and broke down the rough walnut lumber into small pieces. I wanted something contrasting for the base, so I cut some pieces of maple. After the rough cuts, I took the lumber through the milling process. I marked the surface with some pencil lines and plane it till the lines are gone. Do the same thing while passing the lumber through the planer. I get the side opposite to the jointed side fully surfaced and then turn it over and pass it one more time to get the jointed side also even. Once the maple base is surfaced, I cut it into two pieces and then join them together. This is not a perfect book mat join, but it mirrors. I add two dominoes. Dominoes aren't necessary for a long grain joint, but it helps keep the pieces aligned. That's important, especially with such small pieces. Glue the pieces with the glue roller and then throw some clamps at it. When you're joining pieces like this, you want to look for that healthy glue squeeze out. That's when you know that you have done a good job. So I wipe off the excess glue with a rag. I set the compound miter saw at 30 degrees and add a sacrificial fence to cut the miter angle at 30 degrees for the lamp arm. I squared up the miter saw and cut the base to the length. This is how the two pieces will align. I also marked a line for the loose tenon. Switched out the cutter to 10 mil to provide some thickness for the loose tenon. Then on to cutting the domino. Did a quick test fit to make sure they fit and I didn't mess it up. I ran all the pieces through the router table. I added a roundover to the top of the base and added a chamfer to the bottom. I made slow climb cuts to make sure I didn't burn the bottom. For the arm, I added a simple roundover. I wanted to add a decorative inlay in the arm, so I installed a straight bit and made some grooves for the inlays to set. An upcut spiral bit would have been ideal, but I only have a straight bit, so I made shallow passes, and slowly increased the bit height to make sure I wasn't taking too much off in one pass. I cut some strips as inlays on the table saw. Then on to gluing. I added a generous amount of glue and set each piece in and cut it to length with a coping saw. I wrapped everything up in blue painter's tape to act as clamps. After the glue dried, I took the tape off and run the piece through the jointer to make sure everything was even and square. Then on to sanding. I wanted to get all the pieces sanded so that there would be minimal sanding after the glue up. I started with a 120 grit and did a second pass with a 6-inch sander at 180 grits. There were minor gaps in the inlay, so I added a dab of glue and then hand sanded with a sandpaper so that the sanding dust would fill in all the gaps. I drilled a hole for the bulb holder to sit. I started from the top, slowly drilled it to make sure there was no tear out, and drilled from the bottom to the correct side of the holder. Once that was done, I glued up the lamp arm to the base and added some clamps. Once the glue dried, I drilled a hole at the bottom for the wire to pass through. And cleaned everything out with a chisel. I cleaned out the entire piece with a card scraper to make sure there was no glue squeeze out or any minor dings from clamping or anything like that, and then finally hand sanded everything. I cut these two mahogany pieces to act as the wire holder. Here's a close-up. Finally, on to the finish. I'm using boiled linseed oil and I thinned it down with mineral spirits. Here is the application of the first coat. I love how walnut and maple just come alive when you apply that first coat. This is a very satisfying step in this process. After the first coat, I applied 2 more coats and I sanded in between to make sure there were no dust nibs or anything like that. The holder that I have doesn't come with a plug, so I had to order a plug separately, so I wired the ends and attached them to the holder. If you're not comfortable with electricity, hire a professional to do it. There, you've been warned. Finally, I applied some brie wax to the entire piece and buffed it out with that rag. I installed an Edison style bulb. The holder came with a hood, but I'm choosing not to use it because I like the raw industrial look of the bare bulb. With that done, this project is complete. I'm really happy with how this turned out. Here are some close-up shots. The maple base looks really solid and the glue line is really seamless. The inlay too is really nice. I'm really happy with the contrast of maple and walnut. If you like this video, consider subscribing to my channel and hit that thumbs up button. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below.